and it is. So just wanted to let everyone know that it's being recorded. This is the first in a series, so Travis will talk about a little bit about the next ones coming up, and hopefully, if you enjoy it, you'll come back. So I'm gonna ask everyone to please keep your audio muted throughout the program. It's gonna make for a better experience for everybody. And we love seeing your face, but if you're seeing that the video's cutting out or the sound's cutting out for you, you could try turning off your video, your own, camera. You would do that by coming down to the bottom and just say stop video. You're not going to stop the video presentation, but you'll stop your own. And it'll clear up some bandwidth and you might have a better experience. I do recommend for the best experience to switch to speaker view. So if you go to the top of your Zoom screen, you can switch from gallery to speaker view, and then the speaker is going to get large and fill up your screen, and you'll get to see more of what he's talking about. One other thing is, if you have questions, we're going to try to get to all the questions at the end, but if you want to go down to the bottom, around the center there's a chat button. So if you turn on the chat, you could post your questions in the chat as we're going through, and then at the end, we'll come back to them and I'll read them to Travis and we'll try to get to them all. I think that's about all I had, but if you want to test out your chat, go ahead and do it. Just say hello and tell us where you're from. It'd be great to see where we're all coming from.
Yeah. I love that.
All right. So I am going to introduce you to Taylor Robinault, who is going to introduce Travis. She's a good friend of his, and we're glad she's here to help to kick things off.
Thank you, Dean. I appreciate it. Hello, how are you guys doing? I wanted to introduce Travis. He's an awesome guy. We met, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago in Asheville, North Carolina. Like we both were doing a residency at Odyssey Clayworks. Swell man, we used to go get pizza together. He got his BFA at Buffalo State College, and he got his MFA at Edinburgh University. He's done a bunch of different residencies, including Baltimore Clayworks, Odyssey Clayworks, Watershed, and Red Lodge Clay Center. He won the Ceramic Emerging Artist Award from Ceramic Monthly in 2018, and he's currently the program manager at Touchstone. One of the reasons why Travis and I get along so well is because we both believe in humor, and he's got a good sense of humor. And you can see it in his work, and I love his animals, and there's little baby men on top of them doing mundane day-to-day stuff, and he shows real life people. So kind of today, one of the things that Travis and I talked about is maybe talking a little bit about his experience during this whole pandemic thing. So I kind of wanted to ask Travis, what have you been doing to stay sane, and how have you been during all of this?
Yeah, so this has been really crazy. I am very fortunate that I still have my job at Touchstone. There are some Touchstone instructors on this call, which is awesome to see. So I've been able to communicate and connect with a lot of them, which has been super great to kind of be able to do and still be involved in. We're basically trying to rethink our entire programming for the season, which has been very interesting and has kept me very busy, kind of outside of doing that, kind of working in the studio, which I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of artists about this, and kind of how we all feel like we have all the time in the world right now as we're stuck in our houses, but we also feel like we have no time in the world because you're kind of being overwhelmed by what's going on. I know for me personally, I've had all these grand ideas to get a ton of studio work done. Um, I've gotten some work done, which is great, but I think it is way less than I thought it would be. Um, I've had a lot of like motivations to start this really big piece, and honestly, I've touched it I think for 2 days, and I haven't touched it since because I kind of got sidetracked on the other things that I'm working on, which kind of when I show you around, I'll talk a little bit about like what I've been actually working on kind of over this time. So, um, trying to stay busy. I'm lucky we just bought a house, me and my wife. So I have been working on my house, which is awesome. Um, I've done most of the work I think I can do right now, and it's been a lifesaver to not be stuck in my old apartment during all of this. So that's what I've been up to.
Awesome, dude. Okay, so I have one last question, and I think it's a good question because a lot of people probably want to know. Um, what inspires you? I know that you have a variety of different bodies of work, but I think it'd be really good to hear what really gets you going.
Yeah, so I don't want to talk too much about it because when I do my slide talk, that's what it's going to be heavily is kind of what my work is about, kind of the different themes in it. But a lot of my work is drawn from what's going on around me. As I give you my studio tour, you will see exactly how this whole pandemic is affecting me and kind of coming out in my own work, which I'm really excited about actually. Um, so I don't want to jump too much into that, but a lot of like all my work is really kind of based off my current situation of things that I'm dealing with or kind of thinking about. So it's very, especially in situations like this, it's very hard for not to creep up in my work.
Yeah.
My work is very based on where I'm living, what's going on in my personal life at the time. A lot of times I don't even know that it's that much tied to it until I like step back and look at it, and then it kind of terrifies me that it's like a timeline of my life. Very exciting, but also kind of scary at the same time. Um, I mean, I'll talk a little bit. I mean, this is in my like slideshow presentation, but when I first moved to Baltimore, kind of the first year I had there was just put together like a pretty big exhibition, and so I moved there, worked so hard for a year straight, and all you know was a full body full of work. I think I made close to 20 new pieces in that 1 year, which is way more work than I ever had made in my life. And I like made so much I didn't really think about it until I think the opening day of the exhibition I had to give an artist talk. And I remember walking through the gallery and being like almost horrified because it was like every emotion I felt in that first year of being in Baltimore, which was a very rough year of my life. But it was really great at the same time because now I have this like great timeline of every weird thing that was running through my head for an entire year. So that's kind of how all my work is, and it's really kind of changes depending on where I'm at and what's going on. So
Cool. Well, I guess I have one more question as you were talking about it, because, uh, you know, have a lot of things for you been canceled that you're going to be able to recoup? And is there a silver lining in all of this for you?
the only things that really like I had a bunch of stuff going on for NCICA that got canceled, which is what it is. Most of it is luckily being able to get rescheduled. Um, the big thing for me is not being able to have everyone at Touchstone this summer.
Yeah.
Because if you know, I live in like rural PA. Summertime is the greatest because we get to bring artists from all over the country, which I basically get to hang out with all summer. Um, so that's like a huge release for me, which is not happening to that extent, but hopefully some good things will be happening this summer. So we'll see how it all works out.
Cool. All right. Can we see your studio now?
Yeah. Let's see. So we're gonna switch. So I'm gonna pull it up on my phone and give you guys a quick tour. I'm gonna talk a little bit about my studio. So as I said, me and my wife had just bought a house a little less than 6 months ago. So it's been quite an experience. I am currently in the process of setting my studio up. So as you can kind of see, it's basically a barren garage at this point. There's my unfinished ceiling. Half the walls aren't finished. So right before the pandemic hit, I was working on getting my electric done to help get my kiln hooked up, which meant I had upped my service to 200 amp service. And right after that, everything went bad. So my kiln is sitting there unhooked up, but that is about where it will live. Um, and I can't really finish my space until the garage is the kiln is taken care of. So there is a giant pile of insulation sitting on the floor, waiting to be put up. This is my makeshift studio space for now. I've been able to get some of it done, but not all of it. And since all of this is hit, I've been working on kind of a bunch of different smaller pieces, some of which has been really fun. So I can talk a little bit about what I'm working on, what I just got really excited about. So kind of in my presentation, I'll talk a bit about these cloud pieces, or the thought bubble pieces, which are really coming up with this quarantine, and really thinking about all the things that we wish we could be doing, but since we're stuck in quarantine right now, I'm unable to do them. So there's probably going to be a whole theme of work about quarantine dreams, which I'm really excited about right now. I've been making these smaller face jugs just because they're really fun to kind of work through quicker. Some cups, and there is a wonderful pot that I threw and that my wife has decorated. It's kind of what I've been working on in my makeshift little studio space, which I'm so excited to actually get it finished. It will probably be a little while before that actually happens, but hopefully, as soon as this all ends, I can get my kiln hooked up, which means I can get my walls done, I can get my ceiling done, which is going to be the greatest day ever. And then I can actually move into my studio space. So right now, half of it is shoved in my basement, which is quickly filling up with crap. So I really want to get my studio space put together so I can actually move in and really kind of get in and actually get it finished and feel like I have a nice home studio space, which is going to be the greatest thing ever, as I've been working out of like a apartment garage for a while, which was great, but this will be my space. I plan on being here for a while, so I'm looking really forward to being able to build it out and really have a studio that suits most of my needs. Obviously, in a perfect world, I would have like enormous kilns and I could do whatever I want, but this will work really nice. This is by far the biggest studio space I've ever had to myself. It's not huge, but it will work perfect. So I'm looking forward to that once this is done. So yeah. So if we want, I'll jump right into kind of giving the artist lecture about my work. Kind of before I jump into that, I want to kind of like talk a little bit. So my presentation is basically about my path from almost the beginning of kind of getting involved in the ceramics up to what I'm currently working on. I personally find it fascinating to like hear people's talks from beginning of their careers to where they end up. For me, I see a lot of resemblance in my first like work that I made all the way up into kind of the newer work I'm doing. There's a lot of themes that kind of carry through. So I really like to kind of include a lot of that in there. So we're going to jump into it if we can get this to work. Let's see. There we go. All right. So I'm Travis. Thank you all so much for coming and listening to me ramble about my work. This is a giant, this photo is great. This was when I was at Aeromont. Taylor was there with me, and I am eating a giant corn dog, which made my life. I'll talk way more about that later too, but yeah. So I did not start college as a art major by any means. I started college expecting to go into architecture. I was a math and science major when I first started at community college, and kind of through that I was forced to take some design classes, and through those design classes I got into design one class, and kind of through that one class I took, my teacher was really like, oh, you obviously really like the arts, which I did a ton in high school. I just didn't really know what career paths there were for the arts. So I ended up switching my major after that one class, and ended up taking my first ceramics class with that teacher's husband, who's Fred Herbst. And he really got me involved in ceramics. If you know anything about Corning Community College, which most of you probably don't, it's such a weird program, but it's kind of amazing. Very small. They had 2 electric kilns and 2 giant wood kilns. So kind of a very strange introduction to ceramics. I thought everybody wood fired everything, which is really funny to me now, but at the time it seemed so normal. So I went on from there. I ended up transferring to the university at Buffalo before I transferred to Buffalo State College, and pursued a degree in engineering, which lasted for a very short period of time, because it was kind of like being pushed by my parents to not get an art degree because they didn't know what I could do, but I was paying for college. So then I said, no, I'm going to transfer and go to Buffalo State where there is a ceramics program. So transferred, and probably made the best decision of my life to kind of pursue what I really wanted to do. I feel like a lot of people, I got into ceramics. I was in love with the wheel. I thought pottery was the greatest thing in the entire world. I still love pots, but kind of making it work. I was making a lot of like really decorative vases, kind of things that really weren't usable. And then your professor asks you the question, like, why do you make pots? And I didn't honestly have a really good reason. I didn't care if they functioned. I just wanted to make cool looking objects. But I was really kind of attached to the wheel. So right about that time, we had a visiting artist, Jason Briggs, who came and gave us a demo on his work, which if you don't know his work, I recommend look up Jason Briggs' work. I still am, I'm like his biggest fan. I'm like a total fanboy to him. His work is so good. But he does these really awesome little wheel thrown things that are sculptures, and it blew my mind the way that he was wheel throwing and kind of using the wheel in a different sense. So immediately I was like, oh, I can do something like that, and really kind of changed my work and kind of everything I was doing in undergrad. So these are kind of 2 pieces from end of undergrad, working with these little pod type forms, starting to think about bases for these things, which is definitely a theme that carries through all the way up into my work now, is like, how do you display things? These are obviously very minimal, but kind of starting to think about that stuff. From there, I took a year off in between undergrad and grad school to put together a portfolio, and then ended up going to grad school at Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, which is the other snowiest place on earth. So everyone thinks Buffalo is the snowiest place on earth. That is not true. Edinburgh was way worse, but kind of a wonderful place to be for grad school. So coming through, as I mentioned, I kind of had like a wood firing background. So everything I did in undergrad was basically wood fired. So then coming to grad school, I didn't have the readily access to a wood kiln to do. So I really had to change what I was doing. My work, I don't have any work from my first semester of grad school because it was awful. But then kind of started to settle in. I started using porcelain. This might have been right about when I got away from wheel throwing. I started hand building a little bit. But I started working with themes of like these cute little objects that were really kind of grotesque, that, you know, you want to kind of get close to them, but you're kind of disgusted by them at the same time. Trying to learn how to model things to look soft, kind of appear to look like they're stretching, which I'm still obsessed with in work. I really love that, how clay can have that really soft quality to it. Looking at these pieces is so funny because I thought these were so good when I made them. You know, I was like, oh, this is it. These are the folds. These are the wrinkles I'm after. And now that I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's okay. You know, it wasn't quite there at that point. But as I was making this body of work, all my professors, every time I had a committee meeting, it was just like, oh, your work is so blatantly sexual. Has so many sexual undertones to it. And that's not what I was going for at all. But I didn't really see it. So I kind of responded with this guy, which is awesome. They absolutely hated it, but I think it proved my point to them. I was like, this is blatantly sexual, and threw it in their face about it. But really kind of working with that same theme of like this cute little guy, like sitting up on his cute pink pillow. But yeah, you don't want to get too close to him, you know, those kind of things, which then kind of led me into this whole body of work that was a lot about sexuality in general and kind of what I think about how I take sexuality. I've had weird conversations about this. Like I kind of it's like a private thing to most people. I say most people because some people advertise their private life. So I kind of like went on this work, kind of really trying to make work about our own like sexuality and kind of how we hold it private. So this guy's like displayed in a little box that you would shut and tuck away under your bed or something. Working really, really small is kind of like these really precious objects. This piece is probably the smallest piece I've made. It's about 4 inches in every direction. So it's really meant to like be held in your hand. It's kind of like a personal object, setting up on a pillow. I'd imagine you like tucking him into your like dresser drawer at night, keep it out of sight because you don't want to talk about these type of things. But really trying to work on getting that softness of the clay with kind of those themes about it. And so as I was making all of this work about sexuality, which I kind of said it's something I don't really want to talk about, which was a huge realization, I went to Watershed Center for the Ceramic Arts, which was my first like residency I ever did. And through this residency, I changed my entire body of work. So as I'm making all of this work, kind of very sexually driven work, I had to give a slide talk to the group of people that were there, which at the time I was probably 23, 24 years old. And it was basically me. And at the time I say old ladies, now they're probably about my age. But I had to stand up and like give a talk about this work that I didn't want to talk about, which was like a really weird conundrum. But it was such an eye-opening experience. It's like I'm making work about how I hold my sexuality, kind of all of that stuff. Like it's not something I want to advertise and talk about. But I was sitting there and I had to talk about it, which was really funny, which really made me think like, why am I making something that I don't want to talk about? Which got me thinking about different subject matters. So at the time I lived with this dapper looking dude whose name is Ernie. And he was my roommate's cat at the time. And my roommate is the person that loves to dress his animals up, which I absolutely love and I despised all at the same time. It's one of those really fun things that I, like to poke fun of. If it's like, oh, I do have a cat now at the time, like I didn't. But if you have a cat, you're going to put a shirt on. Does the cat like it? Definitely not, but it looks so cute, so you have to do it. Which led to this body of work, which is directly influenced kind of by what I was doing before. But it really kind of led me off in this new direction into getting away from all this sexuality and kind of working on kind of how we live with animals, kind of how we treat our pets, but really working in that same type of style with them. Kind of jumping away from that like pod-like form finally after too many years of working in that kind of same style, stepping out a little bit. So I made this piece. This was all based off of a girl that used to bring her dog to community college when I was there. So I think it was my sci-fi literature class. There was a girl that would show up with her dog in a bag who would just sit in front of me and stare at me the entire time, which I absolutely hated. So it's kind of got me thinking like, oh, how people tote their animals around like they're little toys or, they're like a fashion accessory. So really having a lot of fun with like those different themes within the work. Those were all pretty small. So then it was thesis semester. You're like, oh, you have this giant gallery to fill. And, I was working in porcelain at the time, so they were a lot smaller work. And then all of a sudden I just threw porcelain away, grabbed some earthenware, started making almost life-scale dogs. So this piece is about 3 feet in the longest direction, which was a huge change for me from working from these small things. So I had to learn a lot through it. But I really started to focus solely on dogs as the animals that I wanted to kind of put up my energy towards, and kind of how we live with dogs and kind of different things like that. So this piece is probably one of my favorite pieces from the exhibition. I didn't even realize kind of why it is, but now I kind of do. So this is like the really scrappy dog. I put my own personal story behind him. So I think about this as like the crazy guy at the bar that you run into that has all the best stories, does a lot of drugs. I mean, for me, this was kind of based off a lot of my friends that got heavily involved into drugs, but still kind of thinking about the dog thing on there. That's kind of all the baggage I brought to it. but really kind of like working with those themes. I think that's why I love this piece so much, because it really is super informative of what I'm doing now. Another one for my thesis show. So this was based off of another artist piece. Last name is Vargas. I can't remember the first name. He basically chained a dog in a gallery and let it starve to death in the gallery, which is a really messed up story. And I did a ton of research on it kind of through that, and kind of learned a lot about what he was talking about. And this is always the craziest comic. So I get what he's doing. I think there's a better way to do it. Honestly, by the time I got done researching it, it wasn't the fact of the piece that really pissed me off. It was more so of the images of the people in suits at the opening, staring at this poor dog starving. That really kind of pissed me off. I kind of get he was talking about how like the homeless dogs in the streets and everything, and there's a better way to do it, but it was like a really kind of working through those themes of that. So that was my thesis show. If you kind of notice the basis, so really trying to like create an interactive space with them. So really, thinking a lot about how display affects the overall mood of the piece. If it's just sitting on the floor, it's not going to have kind of that same feeling to it. So from grad school, I ended up getting a residency at Odyssey Clayworks. That is where I met Taylor, where I was blessed to meet her. And kind of coming out of grad school was probably the best thing ever. Grad school was really wonderful, but it really gave me a lot of time to slow down what I was doing in my work. Kind of towards the end, I was making those almost life-scale dogs, one every 2 weeks. So I was just like working, and kind of just rushing through them in a way to make sure I had the work for my thesis show. Then get here and I slowed down. I immediately just like, what do you want to work on? Again, I was really obsessed with folds, wrinkles. So what do? I get on the internet and start searching. What is the wrinkliest animal I can find? Is a hairless guinea pig. Awesome. That's the only reason I picked this piece. I was still kind of focusing on like the same themes as how we pick our animal, like how we treat our animals, how do we live with them. Like this guy's up on his pedestal because there's definitely animals in the world that live far more luxurious lives than I do. But kind of thinking through that stuff. I mean, everything was kind of decompressing from grad school, like not really thinking too much about themes in my work, but more focusing on what I want to make. About this time, I got this wonderful, handsome guy, which is Stuart, and I am totally the person that, we all I think would like to personify things onto our animals. Like we know what he's thinking. I'm always like, oh yeah, he's definitely thinking about this right now, which is totally not true. Which kind of led me to making this piece, which was really fun. So, I made a hairless cat. Stu was obviously not hairless. But really kind of making those, this is the first piece I made with these cloud forms in them, which kind of keep coming back up in my work. Even kind of today, I'm working on things that have this. So kind of putting that, like what this cat is thinking about. So in that cloud is actually a video that plays through with kind of thoughts of a cat, what cats would think about, which is probably nothing. So there's like a monkey with symbols. Then there's like a scene of lions ripping up, a dead animal, which in my head, the video sounded way better, but I do not like making videos. So the video kind of lacked a little bit, but it was really kind of fun piece and kind of sticks with me what I'm doing today. Kind of jumping back in, kind of making a dog. I think this was probably around a time where I was feeling ungrateful about something. So this piece really kind of focuses on, like the dog is throwing this guy a party, but this guy's kind of miserable about it. So I think there was something going on in my life at this time where I felt like ungrateful for something someone did to me, and really kind of bringing those themes of my personal life into my work, which at the time, I don't even think I realized what I was doing, but like it started to kind of come out a little bit more as I'm kind of like searching for what I really want my voice in making artwork to be. I got on the internet, found what a naked mole rat was. Awesome. As I'm making it there, I learned a lot about these pieces. I had a friend pass away of cancer, not lung cancer, but kind of as I'm making this and kind of doing this research about naked mole rats, I read a lot about them, and they're kind of like immune to getting cancer. So it kind of hit pretty hard when this kind of happened to me, so I really wanted to kind of make a piece about this. This is probably one of my favorite pieces I made to date. Maybe it's like the personal thing to it. There's something about it that really kind of sticks with me that I just absolutely love. Kind of this piece, he's smoking cigarettes. It's titled Because I Can. So he's just like huffing down cigarettes nonstop because he doesn't have to worry about anything bad happening to him about it. Um, so really kind of starting to bring my own personal narrative kind of more into my work. If you've ever visited kind of that Western North Carolina part of the country, you will know that face jugs are in abundance. Coming from grad school, it was one of those weird things that I felt like I had to make. I feel like if I put a face on a pot in grad school, I'd have been like kicked out of the program because it just seemed like the no thing to do at the time. So I started making these face flasks, which was kind of like an updated version of a jug to me at the time, because people don't really use jugs. I mean, who carries around a jug of whiskey anymore? I wish people did, but they don't. They carry around flasks in their pocket. And kind of a way to make them my own is trying to think about what the stopper is in them. So the two kind of like look like they have puke coming out of them, and the one is, the little party hat that pops off and you can fill it up. So having kind of a lot of fun with these. These are like the first figurative pieces I did that were kind of away from animals, which led me into making these cups, which making all of this work really was great because it really helped me develop my surface a lot more. It gave me something I could work on that wouldn't take so long to kind of produce. Those animal pieces were taking a month to 2 months to make, as where I can make one of these in like an hour or two. So it gave me a lot of flexibility to learn and kind of play with a lot of different surfaces on my work, which has really helped develop what I do with my work. As I'm making these cups, it's like, what happens if you just put a cap on the top of it? You get a sculpture. It took me way too long to realize that just by closing the top of a cup, it's a sculpture now. And then, bringing these clouds back into my work. So the one on the left would be one of two pieces that I've ever made that is actually based off a real human being. So in Asheville, there was a guy that stood on the corner holding a "Dreaming of a Cheeseburger" sign. My wife absolutely hated him because I think she offered him a banana one day and he was like, "Get lost." He's like, "I want a cheeseburger." So I had to memorialize that guy. And then the one on the right is kind of this figure that's dreaming about, God, it makes me feel like such an old man, even though I wasn't even old, but like I was thinking about like kids and they're like rap music. So there's like a butt in crystals coming out of it. So it's all like he's dreaming of sex and money. But just having a lot of fun with these like different weird, obscure things that I find funny, but kind of, how you feel about what's going on around you. Which really got me to thinking personal stories. So this was all based off of one night of my one friend that thought it was a great idea to break a beer bottle over his head, cut his head open really bad, went to the hospital wearing one Homer Simpson slipper. Great story. This is the only full figured piece I've ever made. Kind of through this, I realized I wasn't really into sculpting the human body as much. But I really had a lot of fun with those like themes within the work, which led me to I really like sculpting the animals' bodies because that just seems, it's just more interesting to me. And then kind of merging those faces on top of the animal and kind of merging the two together. And then with this one, merging the cloud on top. So with this piece, I feel like it's funny now because I feel like I had so many great ideas then, but at the time I felt like I had no good ideas. So, he's got a toilet cloud on top of his head. So I felt like it had shit ideas and couldn't come up with anything. But in real, now that I think about it and I step back from ways, I'm like, oh man, this was probably the time when I feel like I had the most ideas and a lot kind of happening with my work. From there, kind of jumping into work a lot about food. So living in Asheville, it was the hub of farm to table food and kind of that entire movement of, everybody's growing their own food, eating everything. I am kind of a weirdo when it comes to meat. I am not vegetarian. But if it was put down to like, you got to go kill this animal and eat it, if I'm starving, hell yes, I'll do it. But like, I don't even touch raw meat. It really grosses me out. But I love eating it. Like, barbecue food is the greatest thing ever. So I really started making this body of work, kind of poking fun of myself for my own weird kind of relationships with our food. Just having kind of a lot of fun with it. Like, who doesn't like barbecue chicken? I guess if you're, vegetarian or vegan, you're probably not into it. But so kind of really poking fun of myself. If you know me, pulled pork is my favorite food in the entire world. I love pigs, though I would never be able to butcher a pig ever because they're so cute. But this piece is titled "Out of This World Pulled Pork." So just bringing in, this is almost too stupid of humor into the work, but having a bit of fun kind of playing with these different themes within the work. Right as I kind of hit this body of work, I ended up moving to Baltimore, and kind of everything changed, moving from small-ish hippie town to moving to the big city. Dramatically kind of changed everything with what I was working on. So it kind of jumped in, focused right on what I was working on before, kind of those themes of food and kind of my relationship with it, which immediately kind of changed super, super fast away from that, because that is not really the culture in Baltimore. People aren't farm to table. If you have a garden in Baltimore, you're a baller because you have the space to do it, kind of thing. Which then my work kind of transferred to this really weird place, kind of a lot about alcoholism. I think that involved me drinking way too much when I first moved there, kind of to deal with the move, and kind of, we moved to Baltimore expecting to absolutely love being in the city. I don't think it is what we expected, so I started drinking more. I definitely have a string of alcoholism in my family. I grew up, my uncle lived at my house, who was an awful alcoholic for a few years when I was younger, and I just remember those days. So this piece is titled "I'll Quit Tomorrow." He's got human ears because it's like one of those things, if you ever know anyone with any type of addiction, that's constant of just, yeah, I know what you're talking about. After tonight, I'm done. I can't even tell you how many times I've said that about drinking when I wake up in the morning, but it never ends up happening. So thinking a lot about that as I'm probably going on a hard couple-month bender anyways, of myself. Around this time, I got invited to be part of a teapot show. God only knows why they invited me to make a teapot, but as I think I've made like 2 teapots in my life before this, and like ceramics too, that were absolutely horrendous. But it ended up being a really, really fun project. So kind of running with the same themes of like drinking in excess. So there's this guy, I have a video for you that's coming up, but like the top of his hat comes off is the lid. He's got that sweet ponytail for a handle, and it pours out of its mouth, and it pours so terribly good in the best way possible. So I had a lot of fun working on this piece. I'm gonna play a short video about how it pours, because how it pours is everything with this piece. It's exactly what I wanted. Just sitting and basking how glorious this is. I have not made another teapot since. I should, because it's just too good not to. I don't know. I had a lot of fun with it. Maybe one day I'll go back in to the adventures of teapots. Do you guys get the sound? Shake your head if you get the sound. Great. So I basically poured exactly how I wanted it to. We're gonna jump from there. So kind of from there, I really started to think a lot about how this piece is all about how kind of dumb we felt for moving and kind of like that transition from moving from somewhere to the other. This is titled "The Grass Is Always Greener." As I said, we've like moved from Asheville wanting that change and thought the city was the answer for us, but then kind of had a harsh realization that like this is not what we thought it was going to be, and kind of feeling stupid about it. So he's got like a little dunce cap on his head, kind of feeling shameful, covering his eyes with his ears. Kind of having a lot of fun with that. Um, when I first moved to Baltimore, I worked at Starbucks. If you've ever talked to me about Starbucks, you will realize I'll go off about how much I hate Starbucks for like 6 hours because of my experiences of working there. So this is my ode to Starbucks. Working there got me just thinking about how absurd it is, how many different choices of milk there are, and like how crazy people are about their coffees and their milk in their coffee. So I had to like make it the milkman. He's got the Starbucks green on the bottom of him. Um, Hated Starbucks. I still go there today, but I would never work there ever again. Um, Kind of when I was there, I have this infatuation with face jugs that I just feel need to have to make them. I really kind of don't like the traditional. There's something about traditional face jugs that I just despise. So I feel like I just keep coming back. I really want to make a cool face jug. Um, so kind of jumping back and like revisiting this form and kind of like how do you make it cool. So this is, he's very confused. There's like a rocket blowing out of his head. I mean, this piece is relatively big. It's about 2 feet tall, so it's a way unusable face jug, but kind of referencing that historical form and having a lot of fun with it. Visiting kind of this one, having that oil jug pour into his head, and just kind of having fun seeing what I can do with these different forms. And they still come back up. I feel like every few months, I'm like, I need to make a face jug. Then you get rid of the cap on it, it becomes a sculpture. So kind of making this piece, I have the graded, like, this piece is all about my one friend that lives in Baltimore. I wish he was on this call because he doesn't know. So I had a friend, he's an asshole, or was an asshole, I guess, he's like the person you can't take anywhere. Every time you go out to the bar with him, he's like, gets mad, is trying to fight somebody, he's yelling at you about something. So there's, me as the bottom staring up at this guy like, oh God, him again, doing this whole thing. He loves the Buffalo Bills, therefore the blue and red cap. He also owns this piece now, which is even better. That just makes me so happy, and I don't think he ever realized that he's the baby man on top of him. So right around this time, kind of being in Baltimore, started thinking a lot about cars, and kind of driving was like my least favorite thing to do in the city. So really like starting to think about that. This is when my animals started to become automobiles. I started thinking about the animal as a mode of transportation. The baby man is kind of like the driver of it. So this like is being stuck in traffic. Like this guy is having the time of his life on top of this giant pig who's obviously not moving anywhere. But he is still having the time of his life riding on top of him. As I'm starting to make this body of work, I think we went to home for like Thanksgiving, and this piece is about my wife who gets car sick when she's riding in giant trucks and stuff. So to me, the elephant represents a big truck. The baby man, which is my wife, which is really funny, and it's getting sick on top of the elephant. Great story. She didn't know this piece was about her until she was sitting on one of my lectures, and she was kind of angry about it. But really kind of like bringing my personal narrative into these like weird situations about how do we get from point A to B. This piece, this rhino is essentially like the Escalade. I mean, I was thinking a lot about big cars. Coming from Asheville, like people drove old ass Subarus. Moving to a city, you got all these people driving like these giant, absurd cars in the city for no use. They're not hauling anything. They're not like farmers, they're kind of like a status symbol. You know, he's got gold. That's like the decked out Escalade. The baby man's piss flipping you off because that's part of driving. Just having a whole bunch of fun with like making fun of the things that I find really weird and obscure about like people in their cars and the cars that people own essentially. If you're driving in your car, you see people doing everything they shouldn't be doing when they're driving. I definitely remember being on the Beltway around Baltimore and driving around. You see people taking selfies in their car, which is absolutely horrifying to me because that road is terrifying and people just doing everything they can. You know, this guy's riding his walrus around taking selfies, you know, like how disconnected with what's actually going on around them. So for this show, this is what accompanied the piece. So it's kind of like the selfie from the person on there, because what would you do what would be the first thing you would do if you were riding a walrus? You would be like, selfie. But really like having a ton of fun, just kind of making fun of all of these things that I find really weird and obscure. So this is all about me in my car when I was in Baltimore. So I moved there from Asheville with my old, of course, like late 90s Subaru that was falling apart because I was so Asheville when I moved to Baltimore, you know. My Subaru started to shit the bed. It was smoking. I'd be the person that rolls up to a red light, stops, and, you know, smoke's just billowing from underneath the hood. That was me in my Subaru. So the guy on top's like waving. He's farting because it's my car smoking, but just like having almost way too much fun and kind of humor within this work. And this was like right up through my first year of Baltimore. As I kind of mentioned, it was like a weird kind of scenario for me to like look at all this work till then. And then kind of after that kind of first year, I started focusing on different themes within my work. Kind of through that, I think right around, I started making this piece. If you've been to Baltimore, there's like the harbor, which is like a beautiful waterfront. I mean, Baltimore is basically on the water. Almost 90% of the water around the city, you absolutely do not want to get in because it's so polluted. And I mean, this is all kind of like came through about a story of there was like these kids visiting. They thought they would be like wise guys and jump in the inner harbor, and next thing you know, it's like on the front page of the news, like all over the place. That like, look at these jokesters. They thought it was a good idea to jump in the harbor. They're gonna die because this water is disgusting. So started thinking about like how polluted it is. You know, like he wants to be in this pool. The pool of water is like just gross and kind of hanging out and kind of that like weird sewagey. Yeah, you want to swim in Baltimore because it's so hot, but you just can't in any of that nice looking water. The other piece I actually made about a real human being that exists in real life. So this was like revisiting stories from when I lived in Asheville. So when I was in Asheville, we went to Grateful Dead cover band festival. Super awesome. I'm not a big fan of the Grateful Dead, but I had the time of my life there. We ended up camping there for a weekend, me and all the residents that were there. And we camped next to the entertainment for the festival, which was Kenny the Clown. As you could guess, Kenny the Clown lived in his like early 90s Dodge Caravan and would come down to like hang out in our like tent camp little area for a little while. And he would do all these great party tricks, taught us so many useful skills that I've never used to this day. But he'd come down and make like perverted balloon animals. He showed us how to do solar hits, which was where he smoked his weed with a magnifying glass, which he was going blind because he had done one too many times. So he was kind of like a legend, you know, like you have to capture this guy's essence. There's very few people you come along that you just like, oh, this dude is perfect. You know, he would do all of this, and then he'd be like, I got to go juggle for the kids. And you're like, oh my God, what a great human being. So that's kind of my ode to Kenny. The clown has popped up a lot in my work since then. Kenny's kind of become a figure that I keep revisiting because he's just such a good guy. Around this time, I really wanted to make a bigger piece. So this is like one of the larger pieces I've ever made with a baby man on it. I wanted to make a goat. And as I started making this goat, there was a guy in the studio that came up to me that was from somewhere in Africa, and he started to tell me all these crazy stories about this goat from his like home village that where he's from, and how this goat, like this whole town, he was notorious. The goat sexually harassed all the ladies. The goat went to the bar and got drunk, which is, for some reason, I was thinking a lot about like masculinity at the time and like what is a man. This goat was like the epitome of like man. You know, he was like pinching butts, drinking beer, doing everything he shouldn't be doing. And like, what else is really masculine? You know, cowboys, especially like naked baby men cowboys. So I had to throw him on top to just like capture everything that is being a man, and kind of making fun of it in a really good way, because masculinity is such a weird and silly thing to even kind of think about. So there's the real angry naked baby man. He's got cowboy boots on and a scarf, but no pants. Right about this time was during the election. I never wanted to make political art, but it was damn so hard not to. It was extremely hard to just not kind of jump into that vein of things. So as I'm kind of making this pig, it's like I'm gonna this clown on top of him. I really think about this as like the clown's leading this pig around through a skirt on the pig. The pig is not happy, but the clown's having the time of his life as he's just like forcing the pig to carry him around on his back, which is then displayed on, you know, America. This is kind of how I felt at the time. I never wanted to make political art, but it just came out. There's nothing, you know, that's just like I couldn't get it off of my mind at the time. And kind of right towards the end of my time in Baltimore, I've always loved being out in the woods. Like I'm kind of outdoors type of person, but really like when you're living in the city, I feel like all I thought about was being outside. So this is kind of that, like he's trapped in this like concrete jungle, but just dreaming about being out in the trees. This piece was really fun to make because I got to do all this graffiti on the side of it, and most of it is just like random things I've seen around. So it was a lot of fun to kind of make that piece and kind of, you know, bring those clouds back into kind of what I was feeling at the time. So right about then I moved. I was lucky enough to get the current position I have at Touchstone, which again dramatically changed my work. So moved from city to now rural Pennsylvania. Huge change of scenery, huge change of life, and kind of I'm still kind of figuring out what I'm doing with my work, but kind of, you know, how does my current environment kind of really influence what I'm making. So this is the first piece I made here. I always kind of wanted to make a full-bodied hairless cat, so kind of jumped right into this and kind of really thinking about, not really thinking, honestly, just letting it come out and really trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about now. This is still kind of like a political piece, you know, it's like up on top of the like Roman architecture kind of up there, but he's blind. So it's kind of like the cat leading us in the wrong direction. Trying to avoid political art, but somehow it came out again. But really trying to figure out what's happening and kind of where my focus changes to. Just jumping in, making some figures without kind of like, I've always kind of had this really ideal solution of making a whole series of these guys. It might happen sooner or later, but we'll kind of see, just kind of trying to figure out what I'm doing because of kind of this new work and this new move. Bringing the face jugs back up, starting to play with a little bit more of an expression. I hadn't made a whole lot of piece with teeth, like with teeth showing, so really kind of starting to play with that a little bit. I'm just having a lot of fun with these things. Working, these are a little bit smaller, so they're a lot quicker for me to work through. Still making them, having fun with them. So kind of then leading into kind of, this is kind of jumping into what I'm currently kind of where my head's at. So moving from Baltimore to where I currently live. If you've ever been to Baltimore, it's a very polluted city. As I kind of mentioned, the water, there's garbage everywhere. You kind of think when you move to the country, it's going to be nice, pristine. So a little bit about where we live, southwestern Pennsylvania. It is absolutely gorgeous. But my biggest pet peeve in the entire world is the amount of garbage on the side of the road. I mean, Dean, if you're sitting there, I mean, every work morning I drive to work, we're driving on these beautiful roads to Touchstone and like the most gorgeous scenery ever. But you look to the side and there's just like garbage everywhere. Um, which just irritates the hell out of me and kind of gets me thinking about like my impact on things. Like this piece is all about coffee. I love drinking coffee. I love going out and getting coffee. I always try to bring my own mug when I do, but you know, you still like things like that and kind of how they have an impact on what's around you. He's sitting on a pile full of creamers. It's like all the trash that you discard from doing these things that like I love going out and just sitting at somewhere and having a cup of coffee. It's, I don't know, just feels different than drinking coffee at your house for some reason. I don't, you know, and kind of thinking about my own relationship with this. Um, Thinking, I mean, this is kind of about pollution. I mean, you think about the biggest polluter in the entire world, it's the fashion industry. I am definitely not like a fashionista and out buying new clothes every day, but this is kind of about that. Like it's titled Trendsetter. Like this guy's always got to have the fresh duds on. He stands on his pile of old clothes. Just kind of discarding things because that's the kind of society we live in. You know, you get things, you get rid of it. Once it's out of sight, you don't really think about it anymore. Um, you know, this guy's eating his ice cream because who doesn't love ice cream? But there's also, you know, you go out and get an ice cream sundae, it probably comes in a paper cup that just then gets discarded. I mean, hopefully they recycle. I'm not convinced they actually recycled in this area of the country, which is crazy to think about. So this is kind of like a self-portrait of me feeling guilty about getting ice cream. Um, I'm just kind of working through them. I've recently gotten an addiction with like colored plexiglass because I just feel like I love the looks of it. So it's kind of jumping into all the bases of my work. Um, this is the biggest baby man I've ever made. So this is the baby man alone is about 2 feet tall. So um, bringing him up, but kind of putting me into it. This is probably one of the only, like I've worked from reference photos of myself, which I've never really done before on it, and just kind of playing with that a little bit and kind of putting myself into my own work a little bit more. Um, the ice cream, again, I love ice cream. This guy's eating his killer ice cream sundae, discarding the container. It's probably going to end up on the side of the road out here in Fayette County. It's just such a weird, it's a conundrum. I think, you know, we all want to be good. We all don't want to pollute, but it's so hard to be very conscious about what you do. We live in a disposable society where, you know, you can't go to the grocery store and not, I mean, God, if I like hardly make 1 bag of garbage a week, but I have like 6 bags of recycling every week. And again, I don't even know if they recycle out here. I'm not convinced they actually do, you know, and it's just like such a weird conundrum I feel like I'm personally dealing with, is how to minimize my impact on the world. Um, Kind of when making this work, so I made this piece at Arrowmont. If you've ever been to Arrowmont, you know how weird of a place it's in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which is the weirdest place on earth. It's basically like a carnival. I don't even know. It's insane. There's just neons everywhere, racist T-shirts, corn dogs. Like the one memory burned in my head was like the first day I got there. I like went to get a cup of coffee, so I'm walking down the street, and this lady's just like has a foot-long corn dog. She bites into it, and it's just dripping grease everywhere. It was so gross, but so glorious at the same time. So like from then on, I was like, I need to get a corn dog, and then I needed to like, this is like my ode to Gatlinburg. You know, he's standing on a pile of corn dogs. You get corn dogs, you're throwing away the sticks. It's such a weird kind of, I don't know. Go to Gatlinburg, you'll kind of understand the weirdness of it all. So this is kind of the last 2 pieces that I've actually had time to document. So in the last probably not even 6 months ago, me and my wife, we got married. So I was thinking a lot about parties and our impact from parties. So having a wedding, there is so much crap that it goes to waste. So you're thinking about the cups, kind of everything that just gets tossed. You know, we had plastic disposable everything at the wedding because that's just like what we had to do. But really thinking a lot about like that impact on it. This piece is all about the party. You know, it's like the blind person, it's his birthday, but they're standing on a bunch of disposable cups. he's really happy about it, holding his balloon, but the dog's kind of staring up at you like, oh, this isn't great, you know? Um, it's really kind of like, I mean, that was huge to think about that within my work and kind of that whole scenario of like throwing a giant, basically a giant party, which was wonderful, but at the same time, the impact that it causes on the things we had disposable just throwing away, which this is the last piece I have. Um, so that's a lot of what is going on now. I'm really, things are changing now because this whole pandemic is. So what my work will look like in another month from now, God only knows how it will change. I haven't been driving down the road to Touchstone every day and seeing the garbage, so it's been kind of out of my mind, which is really kind of nice. But yeah, that's kind of me and kind of how my work has progressed from kind of when I got started. I definitely want to say thank you all for listening to me ramble about my work. Definitely, if there's any questions, I would love to answer some questions and talk a little bit about that.
You're definitely getting a lot of love on your work. I think a lot of people were just so looking at it, they weren't really paying attention to the chat. But are the cups slip casted?
The cups are slip cast. So a lot of the newer work, a lot of the bases are slip cast. Even the cat on the base, that is actually all just clothing dipped in slip. So it is real clothes that were just kind of being glazed.
Hmm.
So kind of working, I mean, with my work, I build a lot of different techniques. I'll talk a little bit about that kind of at this point. So I really like to keep my studio practice pretty big variety of how I work. I slab build, I build solid, I coil build, I will do some slip casting. It really just kind of depends on what my mood is. It tends to change a lot, like working on the bigger animal pieces, which are all usually built solid. That takes so much time. So generally by the time I finish one of those, I just want to decompress and I jump into a lot of like the smaller pieces and kind of working in a different manner. It really helps keep me active in the studio.
A really great question is, how are you getting your varied surface colors?
So the surface is all a combination of terra sigillata, which essentially is a fine particle slip. So that's kind of a base layer is kind of put over the piece. Then I cover it with underglaze. And then on top of the underglaze, I'm doing washes of mason stains. Kind of the way I apply them is kind of the way I get the surface. So I'm using the mason stains dry and kind of spraying them in a way to kind of build up surface in a different way. I really think about surface a lot. Like I like to explain it like painting. So if you think about the terra sig is kind of like putting down the gesso or something on a canvas. It makes a really, really nice base layer to kind of work on top of. And then really just building those surfaces on top of that to really kind of bring out the color. I'm working at low temperature, so everything's fired at cone 04. So it makes it, I feel like low fire work, it's really hard to kind of get those really deep, rich surfaces. And I think the way to do that is by building multiple layers of kind of different things over the top. So
Yeah, you can definitely see how important that is in your work. How do you choose your colors? Are you just a natural, or is there a method to your beautiful madness?
oh man, it depends. So some pieces have like, I try to like put colors with meaning. Some pieces I just kind of go with it. It's kind of like whatever's on my mind. I'm like, oh, this is going to be pink. This is going to be purple. I kind of know what colors tend to work better with my surface. That really kind of helps dictate what the color is in the end. Certain underglazes kind of will mask a lot of the stains over top of them. So it's really kind of working within the realm of which colors I know are going to work together. That often really kind of is a huge part of what happens when I do it, So obviously I would love to do like a black piece, but stains, if I want to do the washes of stains, they're really not going to show up through the top. So really a lot of it depends on like kind of what I'm going for color wise and kind of like, I think about my surface, the kind of the way I've described it, which I feel like I'm trying to get subtler now, but like for a while, I really wanted my work to look like someone ate a box of crayons and then puked on my piece. So I was trying to get as many colors on it as I could at a time, which I'm kind of starting to tone back a little bit now because I think, when I first started this surface, like that was like my goal is like, how many colors can you get? And now I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can get got like 20 colors on one piece, which then just becomes absurd. So now maybe I'm kind of toning it back a little bit with what I'm doing.
So the eyes, are they all painted on?
They
Or
are painted, yeah. So they're just painted with underglaze, tiny little brush, and then a clear glaze over the top. For all the underglazes, I do use Amico's Velvet Series underglazes, and then for the clear, I always just use Amico's LG10 clear glaze. They tend to work really well. It's great.
and you always use a brush?
Yeah, tiny brush. I got like one with a couple bristles on it to do the eyes. Um,
Sure.
Tends to work out pretty well.
Being an avid kayaker, do you think the river will start appearing in your work?
Uh, Maybe. I don't know. I love kayaking. So since I moved out here, I started whitewater kayaking, which has become a big part of my life recently. That's basically what I do if I'm not at work or in the studio. I'm hopefully on the river, um, which has also got me a lot about thinking about river conservation. Honestly, I've had a ton of conversations with people about that because that's such a huge part of being a kayaker now that I didn't really ever think about. Um, where we live, there's the Yakagani, which apparently is like the most fragile river ever. And with all the changes that the government's currently making, it puts that river at a huge risk of being non-kayakable anymore, which would be absolutely awful because that is honestly one of the only reasons anyone comes to this area of the country because it's such a wonderful place. So yes, it probably will end up coming in my work sooner or later, but we'll kind of see. I've actually thought about making some like baby men whitewater rafting or something just
Yeah,
because.
that'd be cool. Let me see. Yeah, a lot of great comments. People can see the connection between Waterkeeper's work and your awareness about pollution in all the places you've lived. Um, People echoing your sentiments on the Baltimore Beltway. And um, Julie definitely has some stories to tell about your corn dog, I think. So.
Yeah, so both Julie and Taylor were at Arrowmont with me for that wonderful experience. Seriously, if you've never been to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, everybody go there. Actually, Magda, who I can see is on this call, who was a resident at Arrowmont, who came and did visiting artists when I was in Edinburgh, talked about how crazy it was, and I always kind of imagined it until I went there, and then it was way more than I ever could have ever imagined in my head, which seems absurd. It is just like the most absurd place with a craft school tucked in there.
Nice.
It's very strange, but it's kind of a wonderful place. So
Well, I am going to post again Travis's contact information in the chat. So if you have questions for him, you can see more at travis-winters.com. And of course, follow him on Instagram. His email, tmwinters85@gmail.com. Can you tell us a little bit about what's up next for the Artist Happy Hour series?
yeah, so this is the first of a series that I am working on with Touchstone. Touchstone has been graciously enough to lend us and help us out with the Zoom to make these chats happen, which is absolutely wonderful because I think this is a time when people really want to be connected through the arts. I know a lot of the conversations I had, people just want to feel like they have somewhere to go and kind of hear someone else's struggles dealing with what's going on. So this is kind of the answer to that. So this is kind of the first of that series. So next week, we're going to be doing this again at Friday night at 7 o'clock. And the presenter next week will be Taylor, who is the one that was gracious enough to jump on here and introduce me. So she's going to give us a tour of her studio, talk a little bit about her work, and we're looking forward to seeing what she has to say. So, and then it's going to kind of be an ongoing series past that. I'm not sure who's kind of going to be talking after that. But hopefully for now, we're going to keep it going as a weekly happy hour. Hopefully everybody shows up with a drink, gets to listen to some people that they've been curious about their work. And, we'll probably mix it up and throw some actual like artist panels in there and some conversations about different things. So it should be like a really great outlet for people to kind of get away and kind of think about something else besides the current status of everything going on around us. So I am looking forward to having more of these. So thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you coming back.
Thank you.
Great. Well, you all have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Crushed
Thank
it.
you. You were awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was so great.
So great.
I'm glad all of you came. It was great to see so many people on this call that I haven't been able to see or talk to in so long.
I love the cat, Julie.
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of a fancy bowl. And note that I put a blankie in there. The struggle is real. No, the struggle is wheel. As Jason gave us all our stickers at Aramont.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I came across the photo of all of us doing the old-timey photo.
I will get
It was
Jason on here sometime.
so good.
Thank you. I have it in my studio because we all need more playfulness and laughter. And
Yes.
I look up at that picture and it just brings me so much laughter. So we all need that. And then I see each of you in it and it just makes me laugh so much.
I look like Willy Wonka in it, so.
Yeah, you're priceless. Maybe next week, Taylor, we'll do some behind the scenes. I'll send some pictures from that because there's some great Willy Wonka photos.
I mean, there's some killer corn dog photos.
Yes,
There
I was
are.
actually going to start off my slideshow, I think, with that one picture of us, Travis, because that's like one of my favorites.
The one of the two of you is amazing with that
Yeah.
corn dog. I
Yeah.
know it.
It's
I'm
so good.
familiar.
So good.
Yeah.
Great.
This
All
was
right.
great, you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad you were here. Yeah, and Taylor, thanks for introducing him.
I
and
know, that was great.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I'm so happy you guys came up with this idea. I think this is like some of the silver lining in all of this is really to get to see people's lives more personally, you know? I can't wait to see other people's studios because that's like the jam for me.
Yeah, and I can't wait. Like, I have so many great house pots. I mean, this
Yeah.
room itself, like,
Well, Julie, we could do one of, if you have a killer collection.
I do. This is just one room, you know?
So,
But that, look at
I
that Met spots right there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I love
definitely a
that
nice.
guy's work.
I
Like
would definitely
another,
like to mix it up weekly, whether it's like not everything has to be an artist talk.
yeah, it can be showing your collection.
And I would love to do that, just showing the house pots and show my studio and I don't have to talk about what I make, but just show the way I'm moving out of my space because I work from home.
Yeah, I think that I just love hearing what other people have to talk about right now. I think these are the things people are craving.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Me
I
too.
know me personally, if I have to sit and listen to another conversation about what everybody is doing because of this, I'm going to lose it. I'd rather just hear like,
Yeah.
like art. I love artist talks.
Yeah.
No,